I'm super happy that we have this former spy and ex-Israeli special forces. He was the youngest federal agent and air marshal in Israel's history. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, ranked top 10 in the world at the amateur level, managed multinational SEAL teams and 9-figure assets. He is a mindset coach now to founders, CEOs, and, well, people like a lot of our stackers. He is a mindset accelerator. We're going to glean from him as much as we can and maybe hear a couple stories about what it's like to stack your Benjamins being a spy. Well, and I'm so happy he's here with me and a little nervous having a secret agent, former secret agent here with me. Itamar Marani's here. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, how does a guy end up as a secret agent? Like I'm imagining like you're just at a cafe somewhere, somebody's been following you around, and then they take you into the restroom and I don't know, take you off to some secret headquarters where you find out that you've been now transformed into this super secret agent. That's probably not true.
Man, that would be much easier than the route I had to take because just have been transformed. So my route, I was in the special forces back home in Israel. And honestly, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder left after the special forces because I suffered some injuries and I had a little bit of setbacks there. And I wasn't super content with finishing my service like that. And I knew about the Shabak, the Shin Bet, which is our undercover program. It's kind of like a hybrid between the CIA and the FBI.
Yeah.
And it was something that I still wanted to do. I wanted to still prove to myself that I was capable of more than what that injury, let's say, reduced me to at that point.
Well, so wait a minute, just a second. You were almost done. I just want to stop you for a second. You were almost done with your service commitment when this happened. Like you could have been off and into civilian life.
Yeah, I could have, but I was going to go to officer school. I was supposed to go to officer school and basically our version of West Point.
Yeah.
And then I elected not to because I recognized I couldn't do a certain role that I wanted to inside the unit because of that injury. It would just take too long to heal. So I took a little bit of time off, but then 2 months after I was released, after the 3-year service in the Special Forces, then I went into the GR program, the Shabak. And that is very much the opposite of just transformation. It's a 10-week program. It's extremely grueling of a nonstop Krav Maga, shooting drills, tactical drills, physical exertion. It was a very, very tough program that was only open to ex-Israeli Special Forces. And when you graduate that, if you graduate that, then you're certified as an agent.
Most of our listeners are familiar with SEAL training, with Green Beret training, Ranger training. I would imagine it compares very much to a SEAL training program.
Yes and no. So it's interesting. So their assumption, what they told us in the first day of that program, was you guys are all ex-Israeli Special Forces. You guys are all Special Forces here. So that means you've already gone through something like BUDS, like the SEAL training.
Gotcha.
So we're not here to actually see if you have what it takes. We're just here to train you in these specific elements. Now, if you can match the requirements for these elements of combat, stealth, whatever it may be, then you're not a fit here. But we're not actually going to test your character because your character has already been vetted through the units you've all been in. So it's a bit different.
Gotcha. It's a little bit, I would imagine, more intense and more cerebral. In fact, you say that what you learned there when you and I were writing back and forth before this, that they don't focus on motivation. Like our average stacker, Itamar, they focus on trying to be motivated. They get up and try to get themselves motivated. You say that the Special Forces program does not focus on motivation at all.
Yeah, so what was interesting to me, so I had a big situation when I was working at the agency, when I was working undercover in Mumbai, India. And to make a long story short, someone who I thought was a friend that was in the local Gold's Gym there, so just an acquaintance, turned out to be an Al-Qaeda operative who was trying to kidnap me.
Wow.
And that left me with some PTSD. Yeah. And that got me in touch with the head of psychology of the Mossad to work together around that. And what was very fascinating to me about how he started to work with me about getting me back to, let's call it peak performance, it wasn't about motivating me or figuring out a way how to break through certain things or overpower them. He was just saying, instead of you trying to exert more effort, let's reduce the internal friction that you have around this. Because if we can reduce that down, then you don't actually have to be motivated to take action. It creates a much more sustainable system. And it was such a fascinating thing because I definitely did not expect that I was going to talk about. He's like, let's just talk about what fears you have here, what the beliefs you have of how the world works that are causing you to feel like you have to get really motivated in order to take a simple action. Because if you can remove that friction, you won't actually need to get that motivated. Therefore, you can just take it on a consistent basis. It's not going to feel as difficult. And to me, that was fascinating.
It seems like you're working on a much deeper level. And I mean, motivation is one thing, but removing the friction is working on a deeper level.
Yeah, I think motivation is a fallacy. It doesn't last. Like, we've all been there where you read the inspirational book, you go to the conference, you listen to the TED Talk, whatever it may be, and that motivation, it might last a day, a week, even a month, but eventually it fades, and then you go back into the old habits that don't serve you. So if instead of trying to hack this action equation of the level of motivation I have minus the level of friction, I can actually take action, if you just hack at the actual resistance and get down to near zero, even if you're not very motivated, you can still take a lot of action, a lot of positive action. And I think that's the key. It's the best analogy I've heard is, instead of trying to press harder on the gas pedal, what if you put the handbrake down and put effort on doing that?
Yeah. You know, you now run a consulting agency working with CEOs, high-powered people, on eliminating some of that friction. What's the friction you see the most? Do you tend to see the same friction over and over and over?
It's a great question. I think the friction I see the most is a sense of internal frustration of, why can't I do the thing that I know logically I should be doing? And it's a blind spot that they're having some kind of emotional reaction. They have a logical blueprint, of what they're supposed to be doing, but for some reason they're not doing it. And when I point out, oh, you also have emotions, you're a human being, and we need to be aware of them first, and then we need to challenge some of them to see if they're valid emotions to have here, or are they not, that's when a lot of breakthroughs happen. So the way I like to say it is, to most of these guys, these guys and gals, they have a certain goal, they have a certain blueprint, they think about it all the time, they dream about it, they write it down, they plan it out, they think they really want it, but they're actually more connected to something else. So they think they want this thing, but subconsciously they're more connected to something else, and that's what usually wins out. And 9 times out of 10, that thing is usually a fear. And it's not a fear of spiders or heights, but it's a fear of having a certain feeling they want to avoid. And that's what I key in on, because once you can figure that out and resolve it, they really go to the next level.
I would imagine with a lot of these people, especially people that are in the limelight a lot, it's a fear of looking stupid, a fear of leading an organization down this path that might be bad.
Yeah. So the way I've seen it, there's 3 main core fears that affect everybody in various levels, but one of them usually sticks out. Happy to share with you. But
yeah,
one
please
of them
do.
is absolutely along those lines. Cool. So the first core fear is a fear of uncertainty or powerlessness. Now, what's important to recognize about all these core fears is that we developed them about 100,000 years ago. They're in our primal part of our brain, the amygdala, and they serve us amazingly well to help us survive.
You're telling us right now that we can try to talk ourselves out of these fears. We could try to talk ourselves around them, but they're so much older than us that there's no way in hell we're going to do that. Like, we might as well admit that this is going to continue. If they're in the back part of our brain and they've been there for so long.
I'm not sure. The good news is I don't think that's true.
Oh, good.
I think if they stay there on a subconscious level, they will blindside you and they will win out. However, if you can flush them out and get them to a conscious level, then you can be aware of it. Think of it as like a football analogy. If you see somebody running down the field and they get completely blindsided, they're going to get knocked down. But if they're anticipating the hit, they can put in a shoulder, they can stiff arm, whatever they may do, then they can win. Carl Jung said it really well. He said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. And for me, what you're saying, the biggest impact is helping making these things to a conscious level. Because all of a sudden, you're not a victim that's getting blindsided by their emotions without understanding what's going on. You can actually say, okay, this is happening to me. This is the fear that I'm feeling. And this is why I feel compelled to take an action that doesn't serve me. But should I? And all of a sudden, when you get into that position of power, it's a whole different ballgame.
That's powerful. And so I'm sorry, and I completely derailed you. You've got 3 of them that are our core fears.
Cool. So fear number 1 is a fear of uncertainty and powerlessness. This is, I feel terrified to feel out of control, that I'm not capable of controlling everything. This, a lot of people end up micromanaging and being the bottleneck. And if you've ever been called the control freak, that's probably why. Now, the reality is that's perfectly valid to want to take control and ownership over your success. But when it comes to an illogical point where you're just bottlenecking everything and you're micromanaging things that don't need to be micromanaging, then you're not doing something that actually serves you. You're just feeding that emotional fear. So that's fear number one. Fear number two is a fear of worthlessness. This is, who am I to? Or I'm not good enough. Or I need to have this or that before. I need to have a certain accolade, a certain achievement, a certain sense to validate me. This is a lot of times a fear of failure. Or a fear of success even. Like, am I worthy of that success? I'm sure you see there's a lot of money.
Yeah.
People are like, do I deserve to have that much money? Is that okay? Yeah. Sometimes it's perfectionism or imposter syndrome, where people putting glass ceilings on themselves.
Yeah.
And it's just, a lot of times this comes from someone's childhood or an early failure. Like, this is something that, this is the core fear for me that hits the most, because I had that one failure that I talked about in the special forces earlier. And for me, that's still something that I got to recognize. If I'm not conscious of it, it could derail me. That's fear number two. And fear number three, and this is the fear that whenever I talk to big groups, nobody wants to admit they have, but they all do. We all do. It's that fear of abandonment.
Oh.
It's that, what happens if he or she or they leave me? Or I can't do this because of what they might say. Like how you're saying, this fear of what will people think if I derail the company? And the weird thing with this fear of abandonment is that most often than not, people don't actually have a specific person in mind. They're not saying, oh, what will Joe think about me if I do this action? It's this ominous they, this fear of the tribe, that if we get abandoned in the savannas, we're probably going to be left for dead. So we abandon the things that we know we should be doing so that other people won't abandon us. And those are the kind of three main core fears that I see really affecting people.
I feel like throughout my career, I felt all of those. Like as you're walking through those, I think about all kinds of times. I often think about, if I'm standing on a stage in front of an audience, what if I lose the audience? And you're right, it's not a them, it's not a specific person. And it isn't even that audience. It's what if that audience tells other audiences how bad I sucked, right? And it's this thing that's way bigger in my head than it will ever possibly get. I mean, there's no way that my fear will actually ever become realized on that level. And yet it holds us back from so much. And I feel like when you talked about this imposter syndrome thing, I want to dive into that a little bit, because often, social media, as it helps us compare ourselves to other people so often. And it's frustrating. Yeah. It's frustrating. Number one, I'm frustrated with myself that I do it. Number two, it's frustrating that we have the ability to supposedly see into other people. And we all know it's a lie, right? I mean, deep down, people are only showing you their best foot forward. They're not going to show you their deepest, darkest times. But I look at people and I think he or she is achieving way more than I am. They're getting all these things that I really want. And I feel like my skill set's better. Like I look at the fact that I'm 55 years old. I've done all these things in my career. And yet I look at some 25-year-old with 2 million followers on TikTok and I go, damn it. I could totally do that. I feel like we have these barriers holding ourselves back. How did the special forces train you, and now you train other people to kind of push through these barriers we make for ourselves so we can get this peak achievement out?
It's a great question. So truthfully, the special forces did not train me in this way. In the special forces, you don't need to really train in this way because the threat is so obvious in front of you. If someone's shooting at you, you're going to shoot back. The agency, it's a bit of a different life because there's a lot of lulls. You're just basically undercover in a different country for a prolonged amount of time. So it's a very different thing. There you have to be much more aware of your mindset, because it's not just a quick action and you're back to base or whatever it may be. The way I would answer your question as far as how to actually overcome these things, these fears that I feel, imposter syndrome, or, let me ask you this. Is it a fear or is it a frustration? Like what's going on there when you see the person that has 2 million followers?
Oh, I think it's a frustration with myself. And it's not that I want 2 million followers either. I mean, I truly don't care about that. I just look at somebody who's making dumb videos online and I'm like, I have a skill set where I can do that and I can do so much more. Like there's so much I can bring to the world. And I feel like, you're not bringing it. And I'm just using myself as an example. I know everybody driving down the road listening to us, that they've got this going on in the background too. There's somebody in the office, Itamar, who they're looking at, who is succeeding way bigger than they are. They're not getting where they want to go and the other person is.
what I would ask you and them is to ask themselves, what belief do I possibly hold that's constraining my ability to actualize that skill set? So for example, that person who has a lower skill set than me, they're not holding themselves back. They're maximizing their skill set. Think of a skill set as a vault. Even if there's $1 million in the vault, but you can only access 20% of it, that's what it is. If that person has a vault of only 400,000, they have a much lower skill set, but they can access all of it, they're going to be winning. So the main thing I like to look at is, what's the constraint here? Why aren't you able to access it? Why are you afraid to perhaps speak to your boss about the thing you need to speak about? Perhaps try to give it your all on this project and put yourself in a position to swing big and possibly fail. What are the reasons that you're not actualizing all that skill set, but you're only accessing a little bit of it? Do you have some fear around failure, like you said? Or you think imposter syndrome is basically you're saying, I don't think I'm good enough. I know logically that I have this skill set, but I don't feel like I'm good enough. So I'm going to go for small things because I feel confident that I can achieve those small things. And that's the thing. If you can break that barrier, that glass ceiling of what you feel you should be doing, which is probably associated to some fear and some belief that you have about yourself or how you interact with the world, that's when you can access all that vault. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I'm also thinking, as you're talking, that just by putting these little smaller goals into action, that movement creates more action. Like, I got to believe that on your missions, you've got these little tiny things. And once you're in motion, you tend to stay in motion.
It's beyond that. It's just an understanding that this is doable. I think the reason most people don't go for the big things because they don't truly believe that they can accomplish it on a high level.
Yeah.
They have some kind of voice. They say they're imposter syndrome, like, you're not good enough. You can't do it. Well, if you can't do it, if you should be able to do it, why haven't you done it yet? And the moment you can break that facade and actually recognize, this is achievable for me. There's no reason, if I have this skill set, I should be able to do it. Once you create that internal belief and recognize there's no reason for me not to believe it, that's when I've seen people being able to go, and myself as well. So when I was going out in those missions in various countries, I had complete faith that I could carry out whatever I needed to carry out. It wasn't that I needed something to push me. It was that there was a vacuum of self-doubt. There wasn't any self-doubt there. And that's what really helped me propel forward.
You wrote me that you have a 6-step process to help people break through that, to get to that full potential that they have. But before we get to that, I've been thinking all along, Itamar, that there are people screaming at their devices into their headphones right now. Why haven't you asked them about this? Which is this. So you've got this guy at the gym. I just need to go back to this. You got this guy at the gym. You find out that he's trying to kidnap you. Like, there must have been something finally that set you off. Like, what was the little clue that you got? What was the thing that made you go, oh my God, this isn't what I thought it was?
Yeah, so I'll kind of rewind the story. So when you're an undercover agent abroad, you do keep a cover, but you're not expected to just be holed up in your room eating rice and not having any kind of social life whatsoever.
Sure.
There's certain boundaries. You can never obviously tell people why you're there, what you're doing. You can't have anybody ever come to your house or know where you live. You got to make sure you're not being followed. But you can go out to restaurants. You can go out to the gym to work out. And you can make very, let's call it, shallow social acquaintances. Yeah. But you got to make sure that you never have a pattern they can follow. So this person, I met him at the Gold Gym, and I would be hitting the heavy bags, and he was also hitting the heavy bags, kickboxing. And eventually we'd meet up and spar sometimes, and we swap phone numbers, and I would always dictate when we would meet up and how it would happen. He would sometimes offer me, hey, why don't I give you a ride back to your place, or do you want to come with me and my friends to eat? And I would always say no. I'd always make sure I wasn't being followed. I would take my own path. So what happened, this was in 2010. It was the FIFA Soccer World Cup. And it was during the semifinals, during halftime, he gave me a call. And he said, hey, Itamar, is there any chance that me and my friend could come watch the game at your place? Our TV just broke. We're really desperate to see the second half. And I said, no, I mean, that's a weird question, but the cultural differences in Mumbai were like that, where people would allow themselves to interject in a more free manner. I said, no. You can watch the game. There's a sports bar next to the Golds. Why don't you go over there? Enjoy. Maybe I'll call you next week. We can meet up and spar. He says, oh, okay. He calls me again after a couple minutes, and he says, Itamar, they're not showing the game at the sports bar, at the Elbow Room. Can we please watch the game at your place? We're really desperate to see it. And I said no. And it was weird. But I said, no, I'll see you next week. Hope you guys figure it out. He's like, oh, Itamar, please, we're really, really desperate to see the game. We're right beneath your house anyway. And I was like, how do you know where I live?
Right. There it is.
Because there was absolutely no way we should have known where I lived. And as soon as I said that, Like, I remember the hairs in the back of my neck standing up, and my flatmate, who was also an agent, figured out that something was up. And in a moment, I looked at the phone and I said to it, so, okay, here's the deal. You know who I am, and now I know who you are. The call is yours. Basically, like, you blew your cover. You understood who I am, and you blew your cover by doing that. So basically, we got our equipment on. Within a couple of days, I was out of the country.
Wait a minute, hold on. You told the guy on the call, you said, I know who you are.
Yeah, I know who you know who I am. This is obvious now. And I know who you are as well. Because the reason was that I want to create a deterrent. So he didn't think I was a vulnerable target anymore.
Yeah. What did he say to that?
What he was trying to do was trying to catch me off guard.
Yeah.
It was hung up.
Oh,
that was it.
Okay.
It was hung up.
Yeah.
I called my superior as well. And like, we got some police involved, and that was kind of it. Within a couple of days, I was out of the country. And our Mossad attaché confirmed with the IBI, which is the local Indian FBI, that it was indeed an Al-Qaeda cell. They had picked up the trace of my predecessor in Mumbai. He was also a big white guy, for lack of better terms, in the middle of Mumbai, and he didn't keep his cover and identity as sealed as he should. So when they saw me replacing him, they just figured out, okay, this is the next guy that's in this role, and that's what it was.
Wow. I had to hear the end of that story, but now, thank you so much. Now for what's the 6-step process we use to push through this self-doubt? Because I got to believe, even in moments like that, man, there's a ton of self-doubt. Like, am I going to get out of this country? But for us, the 6-step process to get the unblock happening.
It's an interesting way you phrase it, because truthfully, that's not the process that I would have used then, because there you have no choice. I think the real challenge is when we don't have a choice, when we have to do something, we're going to find a way to do it. Like, if, for example, the example of a mother lifting a car off her kid, she's not going through any process. Adrenaline's just pumping through her veins. She's going to do it. The real problem is that sometimes we don't have to do something. Our back isn't against the wall, so we settle in mediocrity instead of going for something really great with our finances, with our career, whatever it may be. And when we have the option to not do something great, that's when I think this process is phenomenal. So the first step in the process is getting really clear on what you actually want. And not what you want just from a certain, it's called a surface level goals perspective, but inverse thinking about that. Saying, well, the reason I want these goals is because I probably want to feel a certain way, whether that's accomplished, whether that's proud. So let me flip that around. Let me say, how do I actually want to feel in the world and about myself? And therefore, what do I need to accomplish in order for that to be a reality? That's step one. Step two is then figuring out, if somebody were to achieve those goals that I just said, what would they need to value? Forget about what are my top values, but what would they need to value in order to achieve that? And then you break down those values into very clear and tangible rules. To say, if I need to value more courage, or I need to value more audacity, or more strategic thinking, what are specific rules that I could live by on a day-to-day or week-by-week basis that would indeed prove, okay, this is a person who's acting with courage? So that's step two. Step three is when we start incorporating the human factor. We say, okay, you're clear on what you want to do, you're clear on how to do it, but what subconscious fears could get in your way? And that's when you got to flush out your subconscious and figure out what belief structures that I hold that would be stopping me from doing this specific thing. Because if you can figure that out, you're already way ahead of the game. When we talked about the whole making the unconscious conscious so it doesn't blindside you, all of a sudden you're not going to be just blindsided and wrecked around not doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's step three. Step four, you falsify those things. Like, I'm not a fan of the whole jargon of limiting beliefs, negative beliefs, positive beliefs. There's just false beliefs and truths. If something's a false belief and you're a logical individual, you will decide, you know what, I'm going to let this go. Even though it doesn't feel comfortable, I will follow what's true. For example, my process, the one that I had to go through, I had a belief that anybody who's not Israeli, what I developed subconsciously without recognizing, that anybody who's not Israeli is going to try to harm me. Because that was something that I experienced with that Al-Qaeda attempt. Now, for me, I had to recognize, oh, this is a story I'm telling myself in my head. This is a belief that I hold.
Yeah. And
I have to recognize that also that's not true. It's not that anybody who's not Israeli is going to harm me. It was still challenging for me to start making new friends and new acquaintances with people that are outside of the country afterwards. But I did that because I knew I can't just fall into these old patterns. I can't be victim to that. I have the power of choice now. I falsified it, and that gave me that. That's step four. Step five is saying, okay, what do I need to remove from my life in a very honest perspective? I'm a big fan of looking at this from a place of humility. I am not Superman. I can't take everybody and anybody on my back, especially if they don't want to go up the mountain. So if we're not heading in the same direction, some people need to be left. Like, it's not a fit. Me trying to go in a certain way and trying to force them to go with me, no one's happy.
Yeah, no, I just feel, Itamar, like for a lot of people, that's the difficult one. Like removing this stuff. I mean, there's two things. There's some tough conversations here, but number two, there's this warm blanket feeling you get at night, you know, when the air's cold and it just, and you got these friendships that are much more, you've had them for so long that getting rid of it is a difficult, but I mean, we may logically know we need it, but man, can this one be tough?
It's extremely tough when you're not clear on what you want for yourself. People ask me sometimes, how do I have a hard conversation with someone? And I say the first thing is you have to have a hard conversation with yourself. And the key to doing that is to be actually clear on what you really want. Because once you're really clear on what you want, you can say, is this a fit or not? Not is this a bad person, good person, but is this a fit for what I want? And while those things may be comforting, again, it depends what you value. If you value comfort or if you value growth and you value your own personal stuff, it's different. And that's for everyone to decide.
That's a powerful distinction. What are our last couple?
The last thing, step 6, is just evolution. What usually happens is that after you figure out what you really want, you figure out a roadmap to get there, and you flush out and then falsify the internal blockers that would stop you from achieving that.
Yeah.
And you remove a lot of the weight from relationships that don't serve you. All of a sudden, you think differently. You're a lot more free, and you set a new target. And it's not this loop that ends, but it's this upward spiral. And that's the way I've seen it go, which is really amazing to see. People just keep evolving. And now they have a toolkit to keep evolving.
That's fantastic. And I love this evolution, that it doesn't end. It's this continual evolutionary process into greatness we didn't know was inside of us. I know, Itamar, that you and your consultancy, you have a cool program called The Arena. Can we talk about The Arena for just a second? Because I like that analogy. Please. I like the name of that. I feel like is it named after like the man in the arena, the Theodore Roosevelt?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Fantastic. Because I love that analogy. But tell us about The Arena and how people can maybe get more coaching from you if they want to go to the next level.
Happy to. So The Arena, it follows that 6-step process. Like I said, it's a 6-week program. It's very intense. It's workshops at the beginning of the week with me and Q&As at the end of the week with me, where every week we follow one of the pillars. So we get really clear on what you want, figure out the roadmap, and then remove anything that's getting in your way from accomplishing that. It's small groups, so everybody gets personal attention. It's a premium program. It's got a premium price. And as far as I know, it's pretty much the only program in the industry that has a 100% money back guarantee. Like, we help winners win, and we only let people into the program who we think we can win. It's something that I love doing, and I'm very grateful I get to do these days. And you can find out how to apply at itamarmani.com/apply. But please let us know that you came from the Stacking Benjamins podcast.
Oh, that'd be awesome if you did. Everybody, let Itamar and his team know that we sent you. His mom said we sent you, and that we're not Al Qaeda agents either. We can say that.
That would be appreciated if you mentioned that.
Yeah. Man, I hope not. Yes. And by the way, if you are on your commute today or you're walking the dog, whatever, we've got you covered. We'll have a link to Itamar Marani's site and how to apply on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. Itamar, thank you so much for all of your insights. This has been incredibly enlightening. I think we helped a lot of people today.
I appreciate it. I appreciate having me on, Joe. Thank you very much.